Hello everyone! Today we're going to take a look at 1959's The Killer Shrews, directed by Ray Kellogg from a screenplay by Jay Sims. 7 individuals find themselves trapped on an island taking a direct hit from a hurricane while giant killer shrews try to break into the house and devour them. I saw The Killer Shrews once or twice years ago. What I've always remembered is the image of the shrews attacking the giant fence. This was a low-budget, independent production, as you can probably tell, but despite its handicaps, it's not a bad movie. I don't think I'd go so far as to call it a diamond in the rough, but all things considered, it's a decent horror flick. You can find a few uploads of it on YouTube, including a couple colorized versions. I do not recommend those. Many of you know how I feel about colorizations of black and white films. Don't get me started. The video I picked was in black and white. The picture quality was pretty good. It did have some issues with distorted audio. It was a bit echoey, and some of the dialogue was harder to decipher. Didn't make it unwatchable, though. It could be some of the other versions are better. I didn't compare them. I really like the concept here. I'm generally fond of stories with isolated settings where a small group of characters must deal with a sticky situation. This setting is very isolated, a remote, self-sufficient island where the communication system is conveniently down and no one's allowed to open the gate after dark. A sea captain, played by James Best, delivers some supplies and finds the island's inhabitants acting very sketchy. Of the 5 strange people he encounters, only the lady is willing to tell him what's really going on, and that's after she's ensured he can't return to his boat for the night. It turns out they've been doing genetic experiments on the island, trying to conquer the problem of overpopulation by finding a way to decrease an animal's size and increase its lifespan. The shrews they were conducting tests on mutated, escaped, and reproduced, and now there are tons of ravenous, giant killer shrews running around, eager to feast on the humans. The group holes up in the house, hoping the shrews will attack each other and eventually wipe themselves out. But they've underestimated how cunning their tenacious enemy has become. The shrews are actually dogs wearing patchy, shaggy costumes, and it's very obvious, unless you happen to be unfamiliar with how dogs run and jump. Wisely, though, shots of the shrews are often quick, partially obscured, and taken from an angle or a distance. The filmmakers knew what little they had to work with and figured out a way to make it look passable. For eerie close-ups, they used a hand puppet, which does make the animal look like a mutant, and in scenes where a pack goes in for the kill, it's all suggestion, the sound of fierce snarls and terrified screaming, plus the violent shaking of branches. Frugality is evident in other areas as well. Only 7 cast members, only a few rooms shown in the house, shot from just 1 or 2 angles. In the scene where most of the characters get their official introduction, the actors come in and out of the room one by one, and it's the same shot every time, and everybody congregates in this one corner where the booze is. It's quite a bit of drinking in this movie, by the way. Set decoration is minimal, especially in the lab. There's a shocking lack of scientific props, and in general, there's not much for characters to interact with as they stand around talking. No wonder they keep refilling their glasses. So the sets are nothing fancy, but the camera work is fairly good for a film of this ilk, as is the pacing and editing. It starts moving pretty fast in the latter half, with a reveal that ups the stakes, a successful jump scare, and a relentless siege that reminds me of what Hitchcock did a few years later in The Birds. The music is also appropriately atmospheric, a nice mix of pieces written by prolific composing team Harry Bluestone and Emil Cadkin. I don't know when these various cues were originally written and for what films, but it does seem that Bluestone himself supervised the scoring. Maybe? There are 2 weird edits, one a random blip, like a frame somehow got inserted in the wrong place, maybe during the transfer from film to digital. The other is an abrupt cut that interrupts a character's action and makes him completely disappear from the scene for a minute in a way that doesn't make any sense. And then he's back, but the continuity is messed up. And then seconds later, we jump further back to complete the shot that had been interrupted, which was showing an action that put an idea in your head and made you say, oh no, now this. But then this cut made you say, oh, what's happening now? Well, where did that go? What about the rest of that? It's jarring, and what's worse, I don't think it was necessary. I suspect they inserted a scene to elaborate on the escape plan, but where they dropped it causes a problem. More of a problem than there would have been if they just hadn't added that scene. My bigger issue with the film, though, is that I do find the love triangle and jealous ex element tedious. The captain shows up and immediately starts flirting with the lead scientist's daughter, who he doesn't know has just ended an engagement to one of her dad's assistants. Ambitious, churlish, often sauced Jerry doesn't appreciate this grubby sailor stealing his girl, so predictably he starts causing problems. The movie's only 69 minutes long, but it still feels like too much time is spent on this. The silver lining is the shock when our protagonist almost feeds his nasty rival to the Shrews. That was pretty good. James Best is most remembered for his recurring role as the sheriff in The Dukes of Hazzard. A sequel to The Killer Shrews came out in 2012, Best returning alongside the stars of The Dukes of Hazzard and also Bruce Davison. These are all legitimate actors, so it was an authentic sequel, though I suspect it was very tongue-in-cheek and they all did it for a lark. There was also a film produced in 2016 called Attack of the Killer Shrews. For leading lady, only lady, Ingrid Gouda, this was, I believe, the most sizable role of her acting career. Before and after this, she mostly played extras and models, but here she has a lot of dialogue to deliver. I believe she's still with us, the last surviving cast member. Frequent Western character actor Ken Curtis, remembered chiefly for his recurring role on Gunsmoke, co-stars as jealous creep Jerry, but he was also a producer on this and Ray Kellogg's other solo directorial efforts. The other assistant, bespectacled and absent-minded Dr. Radford Baines, is played by radio revolutionary and businessman Gordon McClendon in his only on-screen acting gig. McClendon had a big radio career. He's most known for popularizing the Top 40 format. I had no idea. He also provided the opening narration, allowed the film to be shot on his property in Texas, and was executive producer of this and Kellogg's other two films. Director Ray Kellogg sounds like a bit of a jack-of-all-trades, having done some of many different things behind the scenes before trying his own hand at directing. Primarily, he was a visual effects guy, credited for special photographic effects on over 100 major motion pictures throughout the 1950s. At the end of the decade, he decided to strike out on his own and make a horror double feature, and the result was The Giant Gila Monster and The Killer Shrews. I saw The Giant Gila Monster once years ago. I did not have the same appreciation for these kinds of movies then that I have developed now. But at the time, I was not impressed. I didn't like it, and I think I would say it's one of the worst movies I've seen. I don't think it had much redeeming value. Maybe I'd feel differently if I watched it again. I don't know. I do think that Killer Shrews is The Killer Shrews. Let's be official here. I do think that The Killer Shrews is the better movie, and it ended up being surprisingly successful. But afterward, he only directed 2 features, an obscure 1960 family film titled My Dog Buddy, and the 1968 Vietnam film The Green Berets, which he co-directed with John Wayne. His filmography after a certain point implies that making this move toward independent directing and direction of low-budget horror movies hurt his career. He never returned to the level of productivity that he had enjoyed before. I suspect there's a story there. I hope it's not a tragic one. It could be that he just stepped back. He became semi-retired and only came out to do a little bit of something here, a little bit of something there. I do think it's too bad he didn't keep working at this, since the direction here isn't terrible, and he could have pulled off something even better down the road, especially if he was able to pull together the right people. It's not so much about the money you have to spend as having a talented group of people, technicians, effects guys, who have a passion for the craft, even when they're working, especially when they're working with limited resources, and actors who are committed, even if it's a project that isn't going to make them famous celebrities, and a writer who is able to come up with a solid story and convincing enough dialogue. Speaking of writing, for screenwriter Jay Sims, The Giant Gila Monster and The Killer Shrews were his first feature film credits. He went on to write a few more sci-fi horror screenplays, like The Creation of the Humanoids and, most notably, Panic in Year Zero, both from 1962, as well as lots of TV episodes. I didn't know all this information before, but I like the picture it paints of a fun, intimate, hey, let's make a movie atmosphere that brought together veterans and amateurs alike. There's a Night of the Living Dead feel to this production, and while The Killer Shrews didn't take off the way that movie did, it has earned its own following among fans of classic low-budget horror, and rightfully so. It's a fairly entertaining film, fairly well done, despite the odds. If you've never seen The Killer Shrews, but you like this kind of thing, you should check it out. It's not great, but it's got some legitimate strengths that set it apart from your average low-budget movie. And also, yes, the dogs masquerading as shrews are good for a laugh. I hope you enjoyed this video. Go ahead and share your thoughts on this movie if you've seen it in the comments below, and I'll be back next week. Thanks for watching.